right, we're back. That was Suzanne. Not the Weezer version, but
that's what I was thinking of in my head. That's what you said. You're all that I wanted in a girl, yeah. I was going to say, Josh, yeah.
This album is Leonard Cohen's debut album, and it was released in 1967. It's currently 26 on BestEverAlbums.com, albums of the 60s. We talked about his follow-up album, as John mentioned, Songs from a Room, way back on episode 2, so check that out. So a little recap, since I went through some of the bio back then. He is a Canadian who was already an established writer and poet before releasing this album. With the release of this album, he essentially started his music career at the age of 33, which is older than a lot of his peers at the time. In 1966, he moved to the U.S. with the intent of going to Nashville to record music, but then he ended up in New York City in the folk scene there, and he was songwriting during the day and playing his songs in clubs at night. He would also interact with people such as Jimi Hendrix, who was there, Lou Reed, Nico, Patti Smith. His good friend Judy Collins was also there, and she helped get his music career started as well. He had written the song Suzanne for shortly before this, and she had taken that song and turned it into a big hit. In fact, he first went to Judy Collins and said, quote, "I can't sing, I can't play the guitar, and I don't know if this is a song." And then she said he gave her Suzanne and Dress Rehearsal Rag, and was kind of blown away at the fact that he was able to write those things. Cohen would also perform duets with her at her gigs, and he would also perform at festivals at this time, including the Newport Folk Festival, where an A&R rep from Columbia saw him. It was also at this time that John Hammond, who Matt just mentioned in the previous segment, heard him play, and he signed him to Columbia. He began to work on this album, and it was released on December 27th, 1967. Hammond started out as the producer on the album, but then he got sick and had to drop out, and John Simon came in. Now, we talked about Simon before. He produced both of the band's albums that we talked about, Cheap Thrills by Big Brother and the Holding Company, and also parts of Simon and Garfunkel's Bookends album. Initially, it seemed that Cohen was anxious about recording, especially once session musicians were brought in. He was a little bit intimidated about how good they were. There's a lot of stories of him about having issues performing on stage as well. Initially, he didn't like performing. He kind of got stage fright. At one point, he left during the middle of a song, and people chanted for him to come back, and Judy Collins essentially pushed him back out on stage to finish. So he was, as older and quote unquote wiser as he still had to go through his learning phase. Also, during the recording of this album, he requested that a mirror be brought in to watch himself play, because that's what he's used to doing, was in his room or whatever, would play music in front of the mirror. So that's what he did for recording the album as well. And once John Simon came in for the production, there was a little bit of clashing over the direction of the album. Cohen really wanted it stripped down, and Simon was the one who wanted the string and horn arrangements put in. I think Simon was right on that front, for the record. Before this album was released, he also signed away the rights to some of the songs, Suzanne and Stranger Song and Dress Rehearsal Rag, which is on a later album. He signed them away to some guy, but he later got them back after many years. But he said that he was stupid for doing that, and he lost a lot of money as a result.
Yeah.
The album spent over a year on the charts, reaching as high as 83 on the Billboard Top 200. The album got mixed reviews on the release. Once again, the Rolling Stone review is hilarious. Arthur Schmidt said, "There are 3 brilliant songs, 1 good one, 3 qualified bummers, and 3 flaming shits." The album's
now that is the kind of criticism that I love right there.
Yeah,
flaming shit.
That's a direct quote from, and that review's online on the Rolling Stone.
Did he indicate which is which he said is which?
Yeah, his review goes into depth. I can't remember which three he said were the best ones. I think it was Suzanne and So Long Marianne and maybe Stranger Things or something. And so, but over time, the reputation of the album has improved a lot, and it's now considered an essential Leonard Cohen album and one of the highlights of his career. Now, a couple of fun facts about the album. Suzanne was inspired by Cohen's platonic relationship with Suzanne Verdal, who is a girlfriend of his friend. You can't really tell that by the lyrics of the song if you listen to them. But,
no, not at all.
But, and then So Long Marianne was about his relationship with a woman, Marianne Illen, who he met during his time. I can't remember if I mentioned this on the second episode, but for a time he just stayed on an island of Hydra in Greece and wrote songs and hung out.
You did mention this, yep.
Yeah, and that's where he met her, and then they had the relationship, and she came back to Canada with him at one point, and so that's who that song is about. Also, I thought this was interesting. Nancy Lee Pretty, she sings the backing vocals on this album, and she is the mother of Christina Applegate.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Random fact.
Yeah.
3 of the songs in this album were featured in McCabe and Mrs. Miller. That's a Western by Robert Altman from the 70s. And then also apropos to our past conversations, Cohen also was in love with Nico, and he called her the perfect Aryan ice queen. And she wasn't interested in him, but he was interested in her. I think she said, quote, she liked younger men because he was older than her at the time. And then he also had a relationship with Joni Mitchell on and off with as well as Crosby, Stills and Nash, or I can't remember who of them, maybe all of them.
It was I believe it was all 3 of them did.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I'm not saying that lightly either. I think it was literally all 3 of them.
Yep. This is the last Leonard Cohen album we talk about, I think. I did double check that. I don't think we talk about him in the 70s or the 80s. He did die in 2016 of complications from he had leukemia, and that was a contributing factor. And then he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2008. So we've heard his second album to this. John, what did you think of Leonard Cohen this time around?
That review by that one gentleman was actually very accurate, because I was very neutral on this album. I liked track 1, Suzanne, and then it kind of meandered along for a while to me, and then right at around track 6, the middle of the album, he drops in an excellent song, So Long Marianne, which is shocking in terms of how different it is than the rest of the album. It's like, whoa, this is like upbeat, like great chorus, like builds. It's a sad song, but not a sad like maudlin song. It's a sad song, but in a way that lets you know he appreciates what was written or what was done in the relationship, and how it's written kind of really jumps off the page. And then it kind of goes back to the same type of tracks that 2 through 5 were, that kind of, I feel, I don't want to say stagger along, but they're not, they don't just stand out to me. As I said before, the last time we covered Leonard Cohen, the words are excellent. He's a great writer, and you could tell he has a literary background. And so as I'm listening to the words, they tell very clear, coherent stories. I think what one of the challenges is for me is 2 things. One, there's that, I don't believe, like the last album, it's not a Jew's harp, but there's some sort of bizarre instrumentation that just takes over his songs at points. And it's jarring at times to listen to. I'd be curious, Josh, do you know what is that instrument that's being played that has the same effect that the Jew's harp had in the second album? Do you know off the top of your head?
Well, there is a Jew's harp in this album.
Maybe it is.
So maybe that's what you're thinking of. There's also a mandolin and various Middle Eastern instruments.
I think it's
different
whatever the
songs.
Middle Eastern instruments are, I think is what it is, because it just becomes intrusive in certain songs. And I would rather him have just done a more stripped down instrumentation or more traditional rock instrumentation, I guess. The strings are fine. They're not like Nico Chelsea Girls level, just over top of everything, exploding. But I don't know. I think the second thing is that, Leonard Cohen has a song, and it is a love song, and it is a deeply sentimental love song. And I've now listened to 2 full albums of Leonard Cohen, and he has just produced about 24 sentimental love songs. And I think I want to hear him say something else, And this album just seemed like, well written and well crafted, lyrics, but it's the same general idea about, longing for love. And I think after 10 songs, that joke that like every Alice in Chains song's about heroin, every Kiss song is about sex, every AC/DC song's about rockin'. I feel like with Leonard Cohen, it's about sentimental, like unattainable love. You know what I mean? And going back into it and coming out of it. And so I think that was a little bit of a challenge for me as well. I would say this is the definition of a neutral album for me. It certainly wasn't bad, but it certainly didn't pop off the page for me, with the one exception of So Long Marianne, which gave me a taste for what I wanted more out of this album. And if there were more songs that sounded like that or had that type of format, I think I would have liked this album a heck of a lot more.
Gotcha. All right, Matt.
I had a very similar listening experience with this record as I did with the first one that we did. I think that this is like a volume 1, volume 2 type deal. It's, and almost to the point where I could pick like, oh, this song in this album was that song on that album. Like in particular, So Long Marianne. I mean, I would first of all say that I agree that that's my favorite song on this record. And it does stand out above the others. It's also a song that when I heard it, I recognized it. I've heard that played before. I'm not exactly sure where. I know it's been covered by a bunch of people.
Sounds like a Frank Turner song, that doesn't it?
Yeah,
to some
it does.
degree?
But I don't know if Frank Turner ever covered it, but I know I have heard that before, and so that's that in the middle of the album there. That's one of the things that picked me up and was like, oh right, okay, I know the song, and that to me was very much like my reaction to, at least in terms of feeling that it stood above musically, was in the third song of the Songs from a Room, which was a bunch of Lonesome Heroes, which is kind of a little bit more of a soaring type chorus of Cohen, going a little bit further with his voice and kind of he's not really belting, but he's certainly projecting more so than he does in his other songs. I think I probably do like this a little bit better than the last record, even though they're very similar. I think that I felt that this was a little bit stronger. But yeah, it's not. It's also. It's at the same time. It's still not like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It's similar. It is similar to Nick Drake that we did last week. It's got that kind of that sad bastard music type feel to it. I do like this better than Nick Drake, though. I think that I dig Leonard Cohen's overall aesthetic more than Nick Drake.
How about compared to like Scott Walker, Matt? Because I think this is not superior to Scott Walker. I like the Scott Walker vibe more.
That's interesting because I think with the Scott Walker record, if I'm just memory is serving me correctly, I had more the songs I didn't like. I had more of a negative feeling with Scott Walker, and the songs that I liked from his, I probably liked better than the best songs from Leonard Cohen. And I'm not saying that with any. I'm just saying that off the top of my head. I think Scott Walker probably had maybe I don't know if his best songs were better than Leonard Cohen's best songs, but I think that he had more songs that I connected with more than Leonard Cohen, possibly. So yeah, I some of the songs meander a little bit. Actually, the instrumentation, John, that didn't bother me. I kind of liked that. I didn't feel that it was overpowering. It was hard to kind of pinpoint exactly what instruments were being used. So it's interesting that they were just various Middle Eastern instruments done, right?
Yeah,
that's what they're doing. Sounds very non-specific, but that didn't bother me as much. I will say the first track, Suzanne, which I did like as well. I thought that was one of the stronger tracks. Did either of you pick up any similarities between that song and another song?
On this album?
By a totally different band. By REM, perhaps?
Oh, well, I think REM is influenced by Leonard Cohen. but no, what
This,
song?
as soon as I heard Suzanne, I was like, I've heard this song before. What is this? And I got to thinking, from REM's album Up, there's a song called Hope, and it's a very similar.
Oh, okay.
You want to go out Friday, and you
Yep.
want to. And I was like, this sounds like almost exactly like
Yes,
the cadence and the
that's
structure of it. And then I looked. I had to look this up.
Yeah.
And REM did later on, after they wrote that song and recorded it, they realized that the melody was very similar to Suzanne,
Yep.
to the point where they said, you know what, we got to credit Leonard Cohen with a writing credit, even though we did this accidentally.
Yeah.
So they credited Leonard Cohen with writing, and I was like, I knew it. I knew I heard that song
Good
before
grab.
somewhere. Yeah. So I probably overall, John, I have a similar reaction to you. I like this. This is certainly an inoffensive record. This is not like, I'm not reaching to turn it off. I think it's fine. It does meander a little bit here and there, but I still overall, there's something kind of cool about Leonard Cohen's style and I do like his voice. I think he's got some really good guitar playing in here, by the way. Talk about instrumentation. There's some really cool finger picking that he's doing here. And, and I also think I love how the way the album ends on One of Us Cannot Be Wrong. There's some dude screaming at
That's
the end.
Leonard Cohen.
It's okay. It
Yeah.
sounds like a joke. It sounds like,
Yeah.
and I have to laugh at it, but I also really like it. I think it's just an interesting way to, he's just like,
The whistling and then the screaming.
yeah, he starts screaming,
Yep.
which kind of makes me laugh, but I also like that. So yeah, it's in the middle of the road for me. Probably a step above the last album that we covered. So, his lyrics, I don't know, John. They might be easy to follow for you, but sometimes I'm like listening to them and I'm like, I just feel like he could be talking about this or he could be talking about that, and I have no idea. And I'm like, whatever. I'm just going to focus on the music. So,
Yeah.
obviously it's about love, but like, there's a lot of imagery and stuff like that. I've never really been good at deciphering that stuff. So, I'll leave that to you to decipher.
Yeah, his lyrics are pretty complex, and that is, I think, what stands out on this album for me. His ability to, like John said, their songs are all about relationship, but he also mixes in like religion and spirituality a lot, and that type of imagery that comes through over and over again. So he's got this romanticism mixed with like mysticism and despair and religion, and that all gets intertwined. And one of my notes is Leonard Cohen the creator of emo music, because that is kind of like the vibe I get from him. This is a pretty another heavy album after coming off Nick Drake. It's not like on the one hand, like So Long Marianne is so different because it almost feels lighthearted compared to the rest of the music, and he is so stripped down on this album, even though there are string arrangements and things. It's easy to focus on the lyrics for me, I guess, is my point. Is it fair to say it's like his poetry just put to guitar? Because that's one of the either criticisms or this actually gets into our discussion of when you and John were talking about the difference between poetry and like spoken word and stuff like that. I can definitely see his poetic background and his writing background, like John said, in the lyrics of this song or this album. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
It just to me, when I hear stuff like this, I'm like, I know this is good. I have no, it's not something that I can really pick apart really and get. It's just like, wow, there's a bunch of just, it's cool imagery, a couple of things I pick up here and there, but it's a little beyond me.
Yeah, I feel like this album does a really good sense of capturing a certain mood, and that ties into the lyrics and kind of the thoughts on relationships and stuff. And this album is deep as a result. I think the lyrics, going back and just listening to the lyrics or reading the lyrics as you listen to the album, is rewarding. One person who was a collaborator of his said that his melodies are like mantras or a little like meditations, and I get that vibe on this album.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
And then some of that religious imagery that I picked up on, or not imagery, but the lyrics, like from Suzanne, Jesus was a sailor when he walked on the water. I thought that was just like a striking image. The fact that he became a sailor when he walked on the water, not the fact that he's actually on a boat. And then obviously touched her perfect body with your mind. So he clearly wanted to have sex with Suzanne, but he didn't. He didn't have sex with Suzanne. And then another religious lyric I got was in Stranger's Song, just like some Joseph looking for a manger. So those things, they're very like striking images, and I think that's a strength of
and that
this
was
album.
stuff that was peppered in his last album too, or the last album that we covered too. There was the whole thing about, it was almost like the Abraham sacrificing your kid song, or the Butcher or something. The Butcher was like a very, very religious biblical type song.
So those things come up over and over. Even on So Long Marianne, there's some line about praying to the angels, but the angels forgot to pray for us, which is another evocative line. So I think that's where the value and the enjoyment I got out of this album was actually paying attention and writing some of those images down. This like the Nick Drake album, I wouldn't listen to this, in like one sitting again, but there are songs here and there that I would come back to. I don't listen to, like we said with Nick Drake, I don't really listen to the music always to get that like kind of lyrical movement or have that kind of experience where I'm emotionally affected necessarily in that way. But he's got talent, and this album demonstrates that. Do you guys have any final thoughts?
I don't think so on my end.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's like I said, it's a similar listen. I would probably, I don't mind listening to this the whole way through. It's not terrible. I don't think it's terribly long. But this is, to me, it's a nice, chill, relax. If you want to just like at night, kind of just relax or chill out kind of mood. This is a good thing to kind of have in the background. But I don't know if I'm going to go back to Leonard Cohen a whole lot. But it's good to know. It's good to have a better understanding of his style, because I do think it's good overall. It's not. I wouldn't say it's terribly exciting.
Yeah.
Or moving really for me, at least musically, right? I think the lyrics, I think I could probably, invest some time in paying more attention to them, which I know I'm going to get slammed for, because it's like, how do you not pay attention to Leonard Cohen's lyrics? It's like, well, I do and I don't, right? I do and I don't. I just don't. Yeah. So